Hi, ladies. So for the fencing community, my name is Iris Zimmermann, and I fenced internationally for more than a decade and represented the United States in the 2000 Olympic Games in Sydney with my teammate, Ann Marsh. The 90s were really such a pivotal time for American fencing in terms of growth of the sport. And our results on the international stage that we wanted to get a few of us together to talk about how fencing has changed over the years, both for women in the sport and also, how the Americans have now become number one in the world. So we're going to talk about competing, coaching, refereeing, and I don't know if everyone knows that Leslie and Ann and I all train in Rochester at Rochester Fencing Club together. So we'll talk about some of those stories, and I'm hoping they don't talk about some of the stories that we were in pre-session here. So thank you to Ann Marsh and Leslie Marx for joining me today. And women's fencing was first contested at the Olympic Games in 1924 with foil and later with épée, being added in 1996 and saber in 2004. Next year will mark the first time that all 12 fencing events will be held at the Olympic Games, giving full gender parity to fencing for the first time. So it's such a great sport for women, and it teaches a ton of responsibility and confidence. And I got into the sport when I was about 6 years old, and my sister Felicia is also a two-time Olympian and a teammate of Ann Marsh's as well, and went to the 2000 Olympic Games, and she's the one that started me in the sport. And I'll talk more about it, but I want to I've talked enough. So I want to throw it out to Leslie and Ann to talk about how they got started in the sport, when they did, and how they got started. So how about Ann, you want to go first?
Sure. So I went to a small private school in Michigan where, not really the hotbed of fencing at the time, but my school had a dance teacher who had once taken a fencing class. And so she sort of taught a fencing footwork class as kind of a workout with the dance. And then some people started fencing under her, and then they decided they wanted to have a team. And so she hired a coach to coach the high school fencers. And so I joined the team in 8th grade. So that was my first introduction to fencing, and the coach was John Zolkowski. And he was really dedicated and started taking us to the local club and encouraged us to go to local Michigan competitions, and that's how I started.
Before I ask what your accolades are and listing them out from where you started, we'll go to Leslie and she can talk about how she started fencing.
I didn't start fencing till I was in college. So I was a basketball player in high school, and I went to Duke University and was not nearly good enough to play basketball for them. So I started looking around for another sport, and Alex Beganet was the fencing coach there. So I started fencing with him, and one thing led to another, and I kept fencing, ended up in Rochester with Felicia and Iris and the whole crew there. And things I improved over time.
Well, I think you improved a lot. Made the 96 Olympic team, and that was in Atlanta, and the first time that women's épée debuted. And I actually am curious how because I think you did fence foil first and then moved to épée, or did you always fence épée?
No, when I was in college, I graduated from college in 1989. There was only foil for women. We fenced 4-person teams. It was the only choice. So I fenced foil in college, but I think it was always clear to the coaches that probably as soon as possible, I should switch to épée.
I actually fenced against Leslie in foil at a NAC.
Did you really win?
In one of the rounds. It was in Louisville.
I think that was like maybe the first NAC, the first tournament after I graduated from college, maybe something like that. And after that event, the coaches are like, that's it. you need to fence épée.
Well, I don't know. It was like a bout that I was really, really worried about, and I think it was really close. So I remember being very concerned before the bout.
Yeah, Leslie is tall with long arms, so
and very good timing.
So can you guys give, for the audience, a rundown of a highlight reel? Basically, if you were to make a highlight reel of your fencing career, what would it look like and what would it include? Jump ball.
Mine would be relatively short, but I won the gold medal individual and team at the 1995 Pan American Games, which I'm very proud of, and then was finished 16th at the Olympic Games in 1996.
Well, Leslie, you were ranked in the top 16 in the world for quite a few years. So I don't think you should leave that out, because I know now maybe our fencers wouldn't necessarily think of that as being an amazing achievement, but I think back then it was pretty rare for the US fencers to be ranked that high, and also the Pan Am Games didn't count so towards that. So I think it was actually much more difficult to be ranked that high, especially since you know, almost none of the World Cups were near us. They were, at least for foil at one point, they were all in Europe. So
yeah, we had one in Cuba, but otherwise everything was in Europe. And so it was weekend after weekend after weekend of getting yourself to Europe. There were, well, while holding down a job. So there were challenges to get it done.
Yeah, I think we're kind of hitting on some of the things of what it was like to fence in the 90s, where it was balancing trying to work, or, you know, in Anne's case, because she's a superhero, she also decided that medical school at the same time as making an Olympic team was feasible. So we're kind of hitting on that piece. But before we go down that route, I want Anne to kind of talk about her career, because it was so stellar and it was so groundbreaking. And I know for me personally, it was what inspired me as a fencer.
well, so I think that when I started fencing, US fencers, we didn't have any international results really, or not very high international results normally. So I think that when I look back, I'm so happy with how I did, but compared to how the US fencers are doing now, I don't think that they sound that great. But the things I guess that I'm most proud of are starting to train full time, and then you know, for me the unthinkable was that I would make like the top 8 at a World Cup, and I actually came in 3rd during the first season at the Marseille World Cup. And then I think I won 2 more bronze medals at World Cups, and I was
that necklace from Marseille.
Yeah, the necklace from Marseille. And then I was ranked in the top 16 in the world for 5 years, and I think I had 10 top 8 results. And I was very happy with my top 8 at the Olympics in '96. I came in 7th, so I was very happy about that result. But I actually think like my favorite result is us winning the bronze medal in 2001. So, and I think that that was particularly memorable because we had lost to Germany for 3rd at the Olympics in 2000. And I wasn't sure if actually we were going to have the 2001 World Championships because of 9/11 was just a few months before. And you know, there was like a pretty big comeback at the end of the bronze medal match. And then I will never forget the French crowd cheering for us. And I was surprised the French liked us so much. And then I realized it was probably because of 9/11. But I mean, I stopped fencing internationally after that. And so it was a great achievement to leave on. I think that was the first world team medal for the women's foil team. So that was exciting. And you, Iris, what about your stellar results that inspired us all?
Well, you know, the thing I always say that I got into the Hall of Fame of fencing for is at 14 years old, winning the first World Championship medal for the US. So, and I just remember that, and there's a video out, and I like watching the video because it was just pure joy, and it was all the US team around us. People were so excited, and I think at the time I kind of knew, but didn't really know what that would spark in other people. And I think it really I understood it later on when, like, a year later or 2 years later, an Israeli came up to me, and I can't remember which fencer, but they're like, you know, because you did it and you're from a country that isn't, you know, a powerhouse in fencing, I can do it too. And I realized how powerful the result was for people. And, you know, I've won Junior World Cup one year, I've won Junior World Championships, repeated the Cadet World Championships, but you know, my favorite moments in fencing, and I know I'm supposed to talk about all the medals and all the things, but is really the teammates I've had and the people that have inspired me. And I'm so glad to be in this conversation with you guys, because you can really delve into some of these fun stories of what it meant to be together. Because your favorite memory of that 2001 medal is really important, because it really was groundbreaking. I mean, nobody was doing that, and we were making things possible for people. And it really was the solid team that did that. It was Anne saying, hey, you know what, we can actually, first it was like, hey, you know what, we can actually beat these people. And then it was like, hey, you know what, we are beating these people. So it was kind of a cool thing. And I take that with me, because someone asked me, and I want to get into this about women in fencing is, you know, someone asked me, do you ever feel like things were not in your grasp? And I said, you know, that's impossible. I was surrounded by women like Leslie and Anne, who nothing was out of their grasp. So I never thought women could be anything but what they wanted to be. So that I thought was really exciting. So how about that?
Iris, you were super inspiring to us too, because I remember how exciting and how inspiring it was when you won the gold medal. And I remember Bucky showing us, like you mentioned, like the joy in it all. I remember him showing the Rochester Fencing Center group the video, and going back and forth replaying like the moment when you were like being excited, like, you know, the moment of your like celebration, and you did this little skip where you were really excited about the touch, and just how the enthusiasm was there, and that was really important for us too.
Yeah, it was a bit of joy too. So why don't we go to thinking about
I'm sorry, I can't.
Rochester. You want to do it? Or you want to comment?
No, I couldn't comment because I was getting all like tearful. So thinking about watching you win, I like got all tearful, and I was afraid I was gonna like start crying. So
all the emotions. It's all the emotions. Hey, Anne, I actually have a question for you as we're talking about this, because you are a team captain for Team USA now, or you have been. What's the difference? What's the difference on an international scene between when we were there in the 90s and then now when the kids show up? I call them kids, but kids show up to these events now.
Well, I mean, I think it's really similar in terms of the team being together and having that, you know, cohesive feeling. And supporting each other. So I actually stepped down as captain after 2018. I went there with a co-captain, but I really enjoyed being captain, and traveling with the team reminded me of us going to the events. I think that the athletes, even though they're famous or they're, you know, even world renowned, if one of their teammates is in the medal round, even if they're fencing the next day, they're going to come and watch and cheer. So I was really impressed with their cohesiveness, despite the fact that, you know, a lot of them are stars now. But I think that there's a difference in terms of the way the world sees the US team, for sure. And it's so impressive, because I think it was summed up by actually, I was at a restaurant and I had met a German coach who's coaching here in the US now, but he's much younger than me. So I think he's like in his 20s. And I was telling him that when I was first fencing, you know, because Zita Funkenhauser and Sabina Bau and Anja Fichtel had just swept the medals in women's foil at the Olympics. And I asked him who his heroes were, and he said, well, Macialis, of course. And for me, that was such a big moment, because like, for me, I never would have necessarily, when I was growing up, thought of the US fencers as being like the top fencer in the world. But for him, like the German coach, when he was a fencer, his hero was a US fencer. So I felt like that was finally the moment where I was like, okay, we're one of the definite world powerhouses. So.
Do you have Leslie, a favorite story of like fencing in the 90s and what it was like? I would love to paint the picture for what it was like to schlep, just schlep to Europe every other weekend.
You know, so I was teaching at the University of Rochester in the 95, 96 year. So I was on the faculty as an assistant professor trying to get tenure. And there was a period of time where for 8 weeks in a row, I would teach on Tuesday and Wednesday, leave Thursday, get to Europe on Friday, fence Saturday and Sunday, come home Monday, and then teach again. So I was 3 nights in the US, 1 night on an airplane, and 3 nights in Europe. And I repeated that week after week. And that's not good for being a well-functioning human. But that was what we were doing at the time. And finally, when the semester was over and I was done teaching, I just moved to Europe, because once if you're there, then you can get adjusted and be more effective. But I had enough top 16s and I had enough top finishes there through the year that things worked out for making the team.
So there's legend at Simon School, because I went to Simon School, I'm a grad now of there, and there's a legend that there was this fencer who was a professor there that used her épée to point at students and wield her weapon. Well, is that true?
It is true, but it's not me. It was Glenn McDonald. And so Glenn, this is a colleague of mine at the Simon School, and he started fencing at the Rochester Fencing Center, and his son also fenced. But he would take a foil and use it as his pointer in the class. And this was, okay, so you also have to remember, we're using overheads here. Like this is like the world of overhead projectors and the clear plastic slides, and then you're pointing to things, not with a mouse, but physically. So yes, he used his foil for that.
That's amazing.
It was fun.
So we're talking about Rochester. I would love to know, what's your favorite Rochester fencing center? I call it club now because it's club, but it was center at the time, centre. What's your favorite story from the fencing club, of all of us together? Uh-oh, did I pause? Did I pause?
No, I'm just trying to think of a specific story.
There's so many.
I know, there's like tons of them. So,
I remember
I think,
there was I think it might have been Olympic year, 95. Early in the season, there was a NAC in Montreal that we all went to. And we all were together so much, and we were all training so hard, and we were all very sick. So everyone had the same virus, and we were all miserable. And there was one sort of cough medicine that was the only one that didn't have any of the banned. It had nothing that worked in it, but you could actually take it. And I remember sitting around at that tournament in this as if we were playing Duck, Duck, Goose, this circle of Rochester Fencing Center people with this bottle of cough medicine sitting in the middle of the circle and just being miserable all together.
I remember that knack. I remember my cough. So, I mean, it wasn't a knack, but I think for foil that they counted it as a knack. I think that's when Bucky had the great idea that we should have more knacks. And so, but Carla didn't want to have more knacks because then it would cost more money, because not all the weapons wanted to have more. So then he decided to designate this event in Montreal as a knack. And so the poor Canadian Federation, they had 3 people running this tournament, and all of a sudden there were 150 or so, I mean, probably not that many, but 100 US fencers showed up to this event that, I mean, they probably only usually get 30 people. I don't even think they had referees for the first round. You had to self-direct. So.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And of the 3 people running it, 2 people were actually also competing in the event. For foil. I think for London, they did the same thing for épée, right, Leslie?
I did.
Yeah. So, so I think some moments from Rochester, one memory that kind of hits me is when we fenced the team event at nationals in foil, and we won. And I think, like, Iris, I think you might have been too young to fence an open event or something. So
Yes, too young.
yeah, but I just remember us all like so excited and like holding the sign and holding the medals up. So it was a really big moment for us.
We still have the photo up at the fencing club now
Yeah.
of the first medal that we won at for the women's foil team. You were
And
going to say
Iris,
something?
We all wore the armbands. We all had like the green one.
Yeah. Yeah. And Iris, I remember you because you couldn't think of what action you were supposed to do next in the lesson. So I remember you standing on the strip trying to think of it because Bucky stopped the lesson and he wouldn't continue until you thought of the action. And so you were standing there for like 45 minutes. And while Bucky like went in the office and got upset, and then he came out and ran footwork, and you were still standing there, and we were trying to whisper to you like what the action is, and he was yelling at us not to tell you, but to be honest, I don't think I was right. And then I think he had printed on a dot matrix printer the action in like a huge piece of connected papers and taped it in your locker, and then he told you just to go after like 40 minutes, and it was like in your locker, like false counterattack parry post.
Yeah. I never, I've never forgotten that.
Maybe you blocked that memory out.
I think I blocked that memory out.
I think I was so horrified.
Yeah, it was crazy because I remember watching Saber practice, and they were like, "Why is Iris standing in the corner?" So, yeah, I don't think people realize like it. So here we are in Western New York in Rochester, where you can never get a flight out that isn't a tiny plane. And then we've got, how many of the top women's foil fencers were there? They had moved.
10 of the top 12.
10 of the top 12 moved to Rochester. And then we had Leslie who moved, and we had more, more than that, moved to Rochester and all trained together.
Jessie Burke and Arlene Stevens were there.
Yeah, and it was incredible. I don't think we could have, it was kind of the stars aligned and we all came together at that period of time. And I'm not sure I would have been as successful if I didn't have everyone to fence with, or Olga Cherniak and I having yelling matches back and forth. And we fenced, and one thing I remember is when we fenced at the club, it was always game on. It was like a knack every day. And we were just gonna bring there's my kid. We were gonna bring everything we had to the fencing strip. We're gonna try to beat you, because that's the one thing I learned was bring your best, do your best, try to do well in the bout, because it really is respect for the other person. If you really respect your teammate and you want them to get better, you put everything out onto the fencing strip. That's what I remember the most, is how hard we worked every night. And I look forward to every practice, except for fencing Felicia. That was always like a fisticuffs battle.
Yeah, I remember one practice where I was fencing you, and you were hitting me in the flank. And then I was trying to like hit Susie, and she was ducking. And then I was trying to hit Olga, and it's like she kept getting away and going. And then Jane was just powerfully like getting my blade out of the way. And I just remember being so upset. I'm like, I'm ranked like 9th in the world and I can't win a bout at practice. So, and then I do remember fencing with you too, Leslie. Like sometimes you didn't have enough people to fence, and Bucky was like, okay, you go fence épée, And I'm like, oh God, Leslie keeps hitting me. So she's so tall. And like, I think the fact that you were left-handed made it even more complicated for me to like try to figure out what to do rather than pull my arm back. So.
Yeah, but you beat me to win NAC in épée.
Yes, once. But
and having Ann Marsh coming at you with like a few seconds left is not a good place to be.
Well, there were 2 seconds, so I ran, and I don't know, somehow I hit her. But I think that when I went to the World Cup, you made sure that that never happened again. Because I went to a World Cup in epee, and I was so excited I made top 64, and then I drew Leslie. I'm like, really? I flew to Sweden for like a different World Cup experience, and I have to draw my teammate. But we won the medal.
We won a team medal because you crushed the former world champion.
Well, partly because of that, and also partly because you guys knew how to fence those weird people who kept remusing from Norway. Just, it doesn't matter how many parries you do, they still hit me. So. I'm like, stop coming forward.
Stop coming forward.
I have right of way.
So I actually have a funny question is, if you were able to choose what weapon today, if you're going to start another weapon, what would it be? Would it still be foil for you, and would it still be epee for you, Leslie?
Well, I would for sure still be epee for me because I just really enjoy it, and I'm suited to epee more than the others. But I love fencing foil too. Saber, when someone comes at me the way the saber fencers do, my instinct to counterattack is just overwhelming, and then they hit me, and so that doesn't work well for me.
So what you're saying is that in epee, a counterattack is an innate ability. You're born with the counterattack, and then you just apply it to fencing.
There's a certain motion that, like, I will always counterattack, and something about saber, it always triggers that.
I do
really, too, so I also get a yellow card.
I do really like foil. I think that probably I would still fence foil if I could choose, but I know that I was very interested in saber when I started, partly because my coach in high school, who was my coach for 4 years, he was a saber fencer, and so a lot of his other students were saber fencers. So I guess maybe he thought, you know, because women's saber was kind of not really a respected thing back then, I think, you know, he never would have thought about coaching women's saber, but I think that that would have been one of my thoughts when I started, just because of that. And also because I really like to go forward when I fence. So, so I mean, I'm not sure that changing direction is really my thing. So, I mean, whether I fence foil or saber, or even sometimes epee, I sort of fence the same way. So I guess it's hard to say.
Yeah, I do remember when you had practices where Bucky's like, you can't go forward. And it was not your favorite practices, I don't think.
Yeah.
You can't go forward. You know, it's interesting that you said that, and that's a change from the 90s too, is that mentality around women's saber. Do you think that I'll answer the question I posed too, but do you think that the mentality around women fencing epee and saber has evolved and changed, where that's more respected and seen as legitimate?
Absolutely. It's kind of probably hard for people to put themselves back in an era where, I mean, the idea was, okay, women should not be fencing epee, but we're kind of getting used to that. But, oh, saber? No way. Women should not be fencing saber. And that took a long time, I think. And I felt like the US had a big advantage in saber in the early years, because I think the Americans were, okay, saber for women, fine, we do it. But I think the Europeans held back longer in promoting saber for women. So I think that was good for the United States.
What I think was most impressive to me was, as soon as they did have women's saber events in the US, every coach, and these were not necessarily people who were born in the US, so these were all like so many European coaches, but who were here, or Russian coaches, or they were all just the next day giving saber lessons. I mean, I remember seeing Adam and Vladimir Lilov and just all these people who probably the week before would not have been really in support of saber, just all of a sudden they were giving lesson after lesson in women's saber at the next event. And I think that actually was really impressive to me, how quickly they switched.
Yeah, it's interesting because in 2004, when they got rid of the women's foil team, I think if it happened maybe the next quadrennial, I would have tried saber, because I think a lot of my fencing technique, Bucky used to watch saber and watch Italian foil fencers and kind of meld the two for me. And my style of fencing, probably Anne, is a little bit closer to what you were doing going forward a lot. And so I think I would have liked to have tried saber also for my personality, but it's interesting doing commentary now for women's saber and men's saber. I do see numbers of people watching. It's it's still not on par, and I still get those like comments of, well, it's women's foil, or it's women's saber, or we're watching men's saber, right? So I think it's still, it's a lot better than it was in the 90s, but I think that I think we still have a little bit more to go.
Right. I don't think it's necessarily the coaches who have the prejudice now. I think it's more, I mean, I think that there's a lot of coaches that actually more specialize in women's foil or women's saber versus the men's, like the men's equivalent weapon. I think it's more spectators, or I mean, former fencers who are spectators, or even referees. I mean, I've heard, you know, from a number of people that, oh, if you get assigned to referee the women's event, it's less prestigious than refereeing the men's event. And my personal opinion is, and you know, when people talk about, you know, oh, past results or past World Cups, it's like, I feel like they're always talking about the men's bouts. Or the men's results, like when they talk about 2004 like foil final, I'm like, okay, well, obviously you're only talking about the men's foil final, like, and they don't even know who fenced in the women's foil final, which I find kind of you know, frustrating. But also I think that, I sort of personally think that fencing is kind of like tennis, so I actually think that sometimes the women's game is more interesting. So in the men's game, I feel like is sometimes just, you know, well, I can't say that because, you know, we have a lot of really strong people right now ranked in the top in the men's. So it is one of the events I might be more likely to watch because we have a lot of people in the top. But sometimes it's just more about power than like setting up your opponent. So.
Well, I wanted to actually ask, as we're on this of women and men, you both are coaching now as female coaches, and there's not a whole lot. I mean, we're definitely in the minority as female coaches. Can you talk a little bit about your experience being a female coach? What's it like? What kind of female coach are you, or what kind of coach, I would say, I wouldn't qualify it. What kind of coach are you? And how do you help to encourage women in the sport? So there's a lot of layers to that question. So feel free to answer all or none.
And you're more active in coaching than I am.
Well, so I actually am not giving anybody private lessons right now. But when I was trying to only do lessons with women's fencers. But now I'm actually running our club and I do strip coaching. So I do travel with the kids to a lot of competitions and I strip coach, and I love doing that, but I just don't have the time in my schedule to give private lessons while I'm running the club and also trying to get myself in shape to fence in the vets and work full time in the emergency room. And also I have some kids I'm supposed to be parenting. So I actually don't give private lessons right now. But I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, I think you did. And I think it's really eye-opening to see how many things that you have on your plate. But so then I would ask the question of follow-up of what types of things do you, I guess this is a better way to do it, is do you find yourself encouraging women or girls to start fencing, or do you find it difficult at all to help them and encourage them, or what is that like at your fencing club?
No, actually we have, I mean, if you include me as one of the coaches, because I help run the classes sometimes, and I'm usually there. We have 5 coaches and 3 are women. So our youth development specialist is a woman, and one of our other coaches, our head coaches for elite, is female. And so it's really been great to like get to have more female coaches. And we have actually a girls beginning fencing class. So we actually separated that, and it was really, I mean, before the pandemic, it was very, very popular. We actually had, I think, 12 or 13 girls in our girls class. I think for the teenagers, it's not as important to have them separated, but we found that having that separate for girls was great. And we were actually thinking about having a pre-elite, which is a competitive group, 3 days a week for the competitive girls, right around the time of the pandemic when it started. So then obviously we kind of had to stop things, but I don't have trouble at all. And to be with the women's foilists, and I think that strip coaching them is the same as strip coaching the men's fencers. So for me, it's like exactly the same thing. And it was the same thing when I was traveling with the national teams too, like giving advice to the women's foilists and the men is the same. And I think that also what I found is that I think it's more about style rather than your gender. So I know that I'm trying to think of who it was, but I know certain women's foilists would cheer for the men's foilists or try to give them coaching advice, but they would try to give advice to the fencer who fenced more like them, for example. So, I mean, I think that it's very similar.
Yeah, I like your differentiation. It's not so much gender, but it's more style and how you approach the game.
Right.
Leslie, how is it at collegiate level coaching? What is that like? And do you see any differences between the men and women in coaching, or is it also based on style? What is that like?
Well, first to be clear, I'm a volunteer assistant coach.
Oh,
so
sorry.
I'm a volunteer assistant for the Duke team, so not officially they have a head coach and 3 paid assistants. But I try to be helpful, and I'm over time more helpful to the women than to the men, because I can still get out there and provide a good bout for the women, and it's getting harder for me to do that for the men. But the Duke program, we had Becca Ward on the team, and she was the captain, and she is a fantastic strip coach and a strong personality. And that, having her there on the team for 4 years, I think really shaped in an interesting way the dynamic between the men and the women, because everybody, man and woman, wanted her coaching on the side of the strip. And so it was a good formative period there for the gender roles on the team.
I will say that I still think that there's not as many girls involved in fencing, and to the point where, I mean, I don't know how many RYCs and SYCs you guys go to, but because we're a youth-based club, I go to a lot of those events, and at every RYC and SYC, there's about half as many women in the respective event as there are men. So for example, if it's Y12 women's foil, there'll be like 20 kids, then there'll probably be 40 kids registered for the Y12 men's foil. So it's about half as many. So I mean, I guess you have twice the chance for success in women's, but I mean, I do find it disappointing that the sport's not more appealing. And part of the reason that we decided at our club to have just the beginner girls is because there'd be fewer girls in the beginner class, and then they seem to drop out. And now that we have a girls only beginner class, they seem to stick with it longer, and it's been more popular. And I actually have to say that they were very, very dedicated, and almost to the point where if they weren't going to be there for the class, they almost felt guilty, where I've never had that from the beginner group in general. So it was kind of impressive.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm glad you articulated the differences in entry numbers, because that was always a sticking point when I owned the club with Felicia, is we could never keep those girls long term. And it sounds like you came up with a solution. And it seemed like the girls, and I see it even in my daughters, and I don't want to make a huge generalization, but if they had a friend or they had someone in the group that they knew that they could talk to, that it made it much more comfortable, and it didn't seem so much of an issue for the boys. But either way, I don't want to make it too boy or girl, but it's interesting you solved it that way, because we always had trouble maintaining and retaining girls. We had, like you, a majority female staff. We have 2 women that own the club, 2 Olympian females, but we had trouble retaining the women.
Yeah, and we have those house cup competitions, like kind of based on what you guys did with the in-house competitions. And I think there separating the girls is like really important, especially for the beginners, because I mean, that's what I find very frustrating with a lot of tournaments, is that they're mixed. I do think even if it's Y10 and Y12, I mean, not that the girls can't win, but I do think that strength and speed does come into consideration at a younger age. And so my son is really, really fast, and he's 10, and he's been really fast for years. And I do think there's a difference between just the innate speed and strength of girls versus boys, even at a young age. And so if you look at events where it's mixed for those events, occasionally there'll be like a girl who wins a medal, but if you look overall at the majority of the girls in the event, they're in the bottom half. And so I do think it's a disservice to the girls in those events to make it mixed. And I've actually contacted people running RYCs in our region and told them that if they're gonna run it mixed, we're not participating. At least not in the girls' events. I mean, my daughter's 12, and like she doesn't need to fence a mixed Y12 event, even though she's like taller than all the boys, because she's never gonna be as fast as they are. And I mean, I just think it's not really helpful for her. And so I've had a little bit of a response that sometimes they're more adaptable, or they're gonna run them mixed, but a lot of times they'll say, well, we're planning to mix it if there's fewer than this number of people. And I said, okay, then I want my money back. So I have been a little frustrated with that aspect.
Yeah, it makes sense. I also see it from their point of view too, but I understand for development, it does make a difference.
Well, I think a regional event is about development. And I tried to show them examples like, hey, I looked at the last 5 mixed events and the girls finished in the bottom half, except for this one exception this one time. That girl maybe was like spectacular or a standout, but it's hard to get them to see the importance, I think.
Yeah. Well, we have about 10 more minutes, and I wanted to ask, because this is, for me, really looking ahead to my future, is fencing in the veterans events. So what's that stage of fencing life like? And I know, Leslie, I think you won.
Yeah, she won. She fenced one time, and she won the gold medal. And she said she's going to fence again when I get to go. So that's what I'm hoping for.
So tell me about why you did it and what that result was, what it meant to you.
I had been excited to fence in the veterans for decades. I mean, I've been planning. I had contacted the coach, like, okay, so 3 years before I'm 50, we're going to start this program, and then I want to be in all the tournaments and like the lessons. And so we had this whole plan to build up to the exact year that I'm 50. Being ready, and did all these camps, and I traveled up to Michael Marx's club and trained up there, and went to DC and trained with women there, and had lessons here in Durham. And so I was really excited to do it, and I wanted to do it right when I was 50, because when I was competing at the Olympic level, the people who were the very top then were a couple of years younger than I was. And so my idea was that if I could get in like right when I was 50, that I wouldn't have to lose to them again. So I did go and won. I won the individual, and then we won the team event against France, and that was really exciting because I don't know if people really know the format, but it's your 50 fences their 50, your 60 fences their 60, your 70 fences their 70, and then you do it again. So it's twice through. But the order that you fence is random. You flip a coin at the beginning, and if you win the coin toss, you get to pick who goes first, and then the next person picks the next person. but they chose poorly. France won the coin toss, and so they didn't choose well in the order, and I think that made a big difference for us.
What was what was it like to win, and why was it so important for you?
Oh, that's a good question, but I'm very competitive. And after the Olympics in '96, and then I went to Worlds again in '97, but after that, I didn't have a real sports outlet. And so I was always looking for the chance to get back in the ring and be fencing again. And that the veterans, I'd always heard such good things and such positive things about the camaraderie and the experience. So I was just really excited to get back and compete internationally again.
How about you, Anne? Are you ready?
Yeah, well, so I, I had this goal that I was gonna like try to win, the Vet 40 Nationals like every year and fence Div 1 still, and then win Vet Worlds when I turned 50. So, which was going well, but I had luckily I never had these problems when I was actually competing with y'all, but I had so many injuries. So I tore the entire lateral. So I did make like top 8 and even top 4 at the NACs, like I think as recent as 2014 or 2015, which means I was like 42, 43. But I tore the entire lateral meniscus when I was trying to make top 8 at one of the NACs. So I made top 8, but my knee was swollen for a long time after, and then it kept coming back. So I had to get that fixed, and then that took longer to heal than I expected. And then I developed tendonitis, and then that took like 9 months, which was ridiculous. And then I tore my hamstring. And so I was really not doing well. And so I decided to get in shape, right? So I decided to train and get in shape so that I could fence Div 1 competitively. And so I trained every day for like 3 months after the Olympics in Rio, and then at the NAC in October, I tore my Achilles. So it's amazing how long that takes to recover from. So I think I'm gonna be recovered. I'm still having a little trouble with making a long attack because I can't really push off my back leg because the Achilles and the knee are both a problem. But I think that second intention is going well right now. So never really my best thing in the past, but I have to say for me, Vet Nationals last year were exciting because I won without attacking. So I know like people are like, oh yeah, you won anyway, like whatever, you've won before, but this was like a new thing for me to be able to like win an event without actually attacking somebody. But right now it seems like it's finally recovered. So I think maybe I'll be able to attack. And I'm disappointed that there's no Vet Worlds this year because I can't study the people who are 50. So
you're getting ready for next year. So
well,
we'll see.
if it happens, I mean, I'm concerned it won't happen just because of, it's like the highest risk tournament probably is the vets. So I guess I'm worried, but it's supposed to be in Fort Lauderdale. So it's very exciting that the first time that I'm eligible to fence, it'll be in the US. So that would be really exciting. Well, and Leslie said she'd fence again. So
yay! And then we'll all have to come and watch you guys and cheer you on. So I have 2 closing questions. I'll ask the first one is, what is the most important thing fencing has brought you in your life? Given you or brought you in your life?
I would say friends. And I think that I asked this question of our kids, right? So I think that the most important things are the socialization, the competitive outlet, and the travel. I've really enjoyed meeting people from all over the world and traveling all over. And I really enjoy doing those things with our students and my kids now.
Yeah, let me echo that. Like all of my long-term friends, they're fencing friends. And so it's really given me the most important relationships in my life. And I've seen the world. So it's the travel is just an amazing aspect of the sport.
I think it's interesting that, all of us have medals on the, medals in wherever we keep them and all the things that we've done, but we always go back to the teammates and the friends that we have. I've even asked some other Olympians, Dick Fosbury, the Fosbury flop. I said, what's so interesting about being an Olympian and being Dick Fosbury, right? And he said, it's the teammates, it's the camaraderie. And so he has an Olympic gold medal. He even has the Fosbury flop. And for him, it's the teammates. And for me, it's you guys, right? Is being able to call Anne and talk to her about my father who's been sick, and her we never skip a beat. Right? We never need to explain anything. That the people in fencing, I never need to explain anything about what's going on. They're just readily available to talk to me and understand me right away. So for me, that's worth more than medals. The last question I was going to ask is, for young fencers that might be watching, made it the whole hour with us, whole time with us, what do you want them to walk away with? What wisdom will you impart to them, given your experience in fencing? Jump ball.
Probably just to recognize earlier that it's in the end going to be the people that matter.
What about you, Anne? I mean, you own a club and you talk to the kids all the time.
Yeah, I do talk to the kids all the time, and I think that sometimes people think that they're giving up things by coming to practice, but I would tell them that in the end, I think you're getting a lot more, and that you're going to have 20, 30, 40 years in your life where you do the same thing, right? And so don't be in such a rush now. Like, come to practice. You don't need to go to the bar, or it's okay to like spend your time on your passion now, because you're going to have a long time later where you're working where maybe you're not going to have that opportunity. And so I know sometimes kids are in such a rush to go to college and stop fencing so they can focus on their career. And actually I told them that, if you take that extra year to fence, it's okay, because you're going to have plenty of time in your career later, but you're not going to be able to get that year back later.
I think that's such a good piece of wisdom for people, because they always think about what I don't have. If I'm saying no to all these things, what I don't have. And what you're saying is, if you say yes to fencing, you're actually getting more and more. For me, the only piece of wisdom is, I think I lost feeling for competitive fencing when I lost the joy of it, when I lost a connection to what I really cared about, which was the teammates and just the process of getting better. So for me, I really love the process of getting better. Just like you're saying, Anne, is you have this is your one and only chance to really focus in on something where you can really get better and better and better and see those gains and see them immediate. And I think when I stopped focusing on the process of getting better and learning and growing, and then I focused on I've made an Olympic team before. What will people think if I don't make another one? Or what if I don't do well? And people are going to think this and that and that. And so I was so focused on what other people thought or what the outcome was, rather than, wow, I really like fencing, and how can I get this much better every day? So I think trusting the process and being part of the process, and not thinking about the outcome, setting goals, but not thinking about the ultimate outcome, is something that I think is an important tool.